Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, protest music, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well, 4IS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm going pretty well, and
Hmm.
we have an announcement today.
Yes. Before we start getting into the topic of today, I wanted to make it a quick announcement to all of our listeners out there, our YouTube audience, let's just say. We're going to be moving the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast to its own channel now. So there'll be a link in the description to the new channel. So please make sure you go over and subscribe to that, hit the notification bell, you know the score, so you can stay up to date with all of our podcast discussions. But the MysterE channel is going to be focused on the general MysterE content, and we're going to separate the two things, and Revolutionary Think Tank podcast will become its own entity. So make sure, like I said, go over, subscribe now so you don't miss out on anything. Like I said, I'll put a link in the description. I just wanted to kind of do that before we get into the conversation. But yeah, we got an interesting topic, like always, of course, for us.
Yes, I guess now
idea.
we've done the plugs.
We've done the plugs.
Yeah, I thought would be an interesting topic to talk about altruism because
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to take this into the direction because I shared this with you, but I came across the new Benedict Cumberbatch Wes Anderson shorts, and one of them is Roald Dahl's The Curious Case of Henry Sugar.
And so is that actually written by Roald Dahl, or is that is it just sending up his kind of world and all that sort of stuff?
No, these are direct short stories from Roald Dahl.
Right,
and,
very interesting.
Written, yeah, but like, because my partner has read everything to do with Roald Dahl. So when it came up that it was saying it was Roald Dahl, I was like, oh, really? I've never really heard of this one. She's like, oh yeah, it's a very good one, and yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess
really, I couldn't look away from it, to be honest. And for any of you out there who haven't seen this, I highly advise go out and check it out. We'll try not to have any spoilers in this episode, but fascinating journey that you go through, and talking about altruism. Really discovers / explores what that means, I guess, in a very kind of unique context, really.
Well, you know what's curious about it, no pun intended, is I kind of feel like the story is Scrooge with extra steps.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of that element to it. Like, I think Scrooge has more of a mystical element, in the sense that kind of the things that happen to Scrooge in the Christmas Carol kind of happen beyond his control. And so they are an experience that happens to him with input from another entity, a position from outside himself. It seems to be some type of divine intervention almost, that's kind of setting him on the straight and narrow, or correcting the errors in his ways and his selfish and greedy behaviors. But like this story seems to come from the main character's own volition, even though they kind of don't realize it at the time, which was an interesting kind of perspective on the whole altruism take.
Yeah, and I think it's a good follow-on from our last episode, which is obviously about self-help and improving yourself. But in order to fulfill your own life, you have to contribute back to the society.
Yeah, to get that fulfillment.
And also, it's a joke in one of the parts of this short movie that when he tries to fulfill himself and he decides to do what he thinks is philanthropic, a policeman goes to him and is like, wait, why would you just throw money on the street? That's stupid. You've caused a massive ruckus. do something more productive with your life.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
quite.
Well, like I think it's more striking than that because the police officers kind of like, well, you, Mr. Bourgeois, never had experienced any hardship in your life, and here you are throwing out the money out the window to like, people on the street thinking that you're doing a service. You're not doing anything. You're a public nuisance. If you knew what real hardship was, you wouldn't be throwing money out the window. That's, you're not helping anyone by doing that. Just causing chaos. Now, I think it might be important. So the title of the movie again for us is The Curious Case
Case of Henry
of
Sugar.
Henry Sugar. Like we'll put that in the title so people can check it out themselves. But like basically, without spoiling anything, it's really just the story of someone who's fairly entitled, a rich man who comes across, let's say, an account, an autobiography or a biography on someone's life who he reads. It kind of sets him on a path to develop some type of skill based on meditation and like focus and all that sort of stuff. And he stumbles across basically like a superhuman capability. He's able to see things without, without having to look at them with his eyes. And he obviously uses that power for his own benefit, or he thinks he's going to be using it for his own benefit, and he's able to gamble and like play the house and make a lot of money, but he doesn't find that rewarding anymore after he's developed this incredible skill and it's taken all this time to do. And he's kind of transcended his original position through like this personal development, and unbeknownst to him, that ends up being the catalyst for this change, this altruistic change that happens with him. He's very greedy and selfish before that, very self-focused, and then all of a sudden he kind of understands that in order to adjust to this new lifestyle and this new power, he's going to have to give it away to a higher purpose. And that's the development of the story, right?
Yes, and also I think to take it full circle as well is he goes from being completely selfish to swinging to the complete opposite pendulum, in the sense of Roald Dahl is actually a character within itself, where hey, I'm writing this biography for Henry Sugar, but the thing though is that Henry Sugar is a code name. Like he is so altruistic, or at least he's become so consumed by his need to be altruistic that he doesn't want people to know his name, because then it would defeat the purpose of his altruism.
Yeah. And I think that's a very strong point, and like is very kind of, it epitomizes what it is to be altruistic, right? It's got to do with the idea of, giving selflessly, and definitely in a way that you don't seek any kind of self-aggrandizement from that or any benefit from that. Like you're not doing it because you want to big note yourself, or you're not doing it because you want some higher status or to be held in some type of high regard by other people. You're not getting any kickback from it. You're doing it because there's some type of moral reasoning behind that. There's some type of drive that sustains you in giving yourself or giving your talent or your skill or your resources to other people, or other beings. It doesn't have to be limited to people, I guess. You could be altruistic in your relationship to nature.
Yes.
Or the environment around you. But like I want to draw back to what you said about like kind of the self-help that we talked about in the last podcast episode. Then like there's this kind of, don't get me wrong, I think it's important that like kind of self-development kind of puts you on a trajectory of seeking fulfillment out of something, and that fulfillment comes when you contribute something, which is what that story is all about. But it's also an important part of self-help and Marxism and socialism is the idea that the self-development is the most important part. So working on yourself, and doing things kind of out of experience, right? So this guy, the main character, spends, like a couple of years or 3 years or something developing this skill, and that's what ultimately leads to the change within him and allows him to contribute to society and do all the wonderful things that he does. But like, it is the process of like investing incredibly in your own personal growth, or investing heavily in people, and that investment and the process that is what delivers the ultimate change in this main character and in
Yeah.
people generally. You can sit down and theorize about what you would be like if you did certain things, and like, what that would make of you, and what you would be able to contribute and do with all of this skill and power that you've acquired over time. But it's not until you sit down and you commit yourself to something and you do it over a long period of time that you start to see that anything that was theoretical before may change and morph into something else, something that you had no conception of earlier, and like it now turns into its own thing. And that's definitely what happens with this main character, right? He has this idea that he's going to develop some skill so he can, make himself wealthy, because he's going to be able to apply this, and like no one's going to know what's going on. But like the process of the change, like through developing and becoming this new person, sets him off on a trajectory which is akin to what he was doing, but like the end result is not the same. He's not trying to do it for his own personal gain. He ends up finding out that he has to find some other way to make this meaningful for him. And it's not about self ambition or money anymore. It's about like being able to do something for somebody else. But like, it's that process. That's the important part. It's the process. Before that, so anything that is going to come out of the process is theoretical. Once you engage in the process, then like you may even develop a higher understanding for what it is that you're doing because you've been involved in it. And Marxism and socialism are very much about that. Like, you can sit down and theorize about like socialist utopias and like, the next stage of capitalism, and the next stage that will lead to communist society and communal living and all this sort of stuff. But like, until you put that into practice and you like get politically active and you get economically active and you fight for the causes that you believe in, until you engage in the struggle, you don't know. It's all theoretical. And like, where you end up after you engage in the struggle for so long and you commit yourself to it may be very different to where you set out, and may be very different to the intentions that you had at the beginning. But like, self-help and Marxism and socialism have this kind of understanding that you have to experience something like physically. You can't just theorize about it. And it's only from the development of that struggle that's when change occurs. It's through that process, through the motion of it, to use kind of that dialectical kind of understanding of everything. And you can see kind of that dialectical process coming out in the main character of the story.
Well, to be completely honest, he almost turns into a Robin Hood character, because what originally, because the fact of the matter is the reason why he wanted to hone the skill, and I guess within the story itself, the casino was obviously put as a metaphor that was in relation to his earlier character of the amount of greed and also selfishness that he had. So for him to end up using that skill, and him opening all of the orphanages and the universities, and him turning
the hospitals,
exactly, him turning around and robbing for the rich to give to the poor. I think it played off that metaphor quite well. But
like, so what do you think about the whole like Robin Hood kind of idea? There was like, like robbing from the rich to give to the poor, like as a revolutionary, as a person that's interested in stories like this, in altruism and all that sort of stuff. Is it justified in your opinion, for, I guess, robbing from the rich to give to the poor? Or like, well, obviously he's going into casinos and like he's cheating.
Hmm.
And like he's obviously doing that for a higher purpose, like he's giving away for altruistic purposes. But like, does it justify robbing from an institution like a casino, and like going all over the world and doing that and sending money on to kind of institutions that need the money desperately? Does it justify the action? Does it?
Well,
Is the Robin Hood ideal, um, or trope, or archetype, is that justifiable?
okay, you're kind of preempting the second half of when I was going to kind of bring this up, but I'm kind of happy to bring it up now because I kind of feel like a lot of people focus on the good sides of what altruism is, and I think this is where you can get that kind of Robin Hood legend or mentality when it does come to altruism. But the funny thing is that a lot of people don't necessarily focus on the other side of the coin when we're talking about this. And what I mean by this is that sometimes uh, the smoke screen of altruism and what you're kind of uh, doing for the people in a very narrow way can actually mask some harms that actually go on elsewhere.
Mm,
And because I've actually just recently finished listening to a book by Peter S. Goodman called Davos Man. So what's interesting about Davos Man is it's basically all your rich types, your Elon Musk's, your Jeff Bezos, and I keep on forgetting the name of the guy who started Salesforce. All of those rich types go to this place in Switzerland called Davos.
yeah.
And, they wax poetically about how they can improve the world and blah, blah, blah. But it was actually during the latter half of his book that he starts talking about tax. And he goes into the idea of them having all the best accountants that can, go send their money off to the Cayman Islands and all of that.
Yeah.
They're able to successfully do that, but by doing a smokescreen of, hey, I'm the head of Google and I can give my employees all these fancy lounges and I give so much to charity and
Mm,
I do so much philanthropic things that really like I should not like even though I pay zero taxing compared to my employees. I'm entitled to do that because really
and
a
doing a public
really
service, really.
I'm doing a public service and I'm doing such great good that
Mm,
um, my investments and what I would call in brackets my ability to exploit based on my market power,
mm, mm.
I should be able to do this because of my altruism. So
Yeah,
I think this is the dark side to it. So
yeah. So
yes, it's
altruism can be manipulated.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like, and used by nefarious kind of people for, darker ends, which is, ultimately robbing the system and like
Hmm.
ostensibly calling it, you know, charity, or saying that, it's an offset really because I'm doing all of this other stuff. But like, I mean more specifically though, do you think like it's justified for a Robin Hood type, not a Davos man type, but a Robin Hood type, like our friend here, Henry Sugar. Like, is it justifiable to rob from the rich to give to the poor in the literal sense or in any metaphoric sense? Do you think, for as I'm pressing you for your
Hmm.
moral standpoint on this one, is it justified?
Um, I'm going to say I'm going to say no because I actually don't believe that there is a philosopher king. So in this scenario, you'd have to have somebody that is incredibly principled and incredibly uncorruptible.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
basically, like an unmovable object
Hmm.
that is incapable of n- having this power and not taking a little bit off the side.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
really, to my very core as a person, and I guess as a socialist within a society, is that you need some regulation because it's not necessarily that you can't trust people.
Mm,
It's just that um, in society, you are going to have good people and bad people. And the importance of regulation is not necessarily that everyone is bad, it's
mm.
just that you safeguard yourself against people doing crappy things.
Yeah.
And,
So what I'm hearing is no, it's not justifiable. Robin
uh,
Hood's legend, the Robin Hood story, and anyone who kind of adapts that, like Henry Sugar, in this case,
well, I just think that it's an unnecessary Pandora's box.
yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Look, I get that. I get that angle, but I'm
Mm.
going to have to disagree with you. I really do
Okay.
think it's justifiable in those
Okay.
circumstances. I'm not talking about like Davos Man again. I'm talking about your actual like kind of Robin Hood
Mm.
story, where you have somebody that's literally, yeah, taking from people that have more than enough and like let's say kind of redistributing it to give to people that don't have enough
Mm.
or are in need of more. And like kind of redistributing it across that system. Now, the real question that comes out of that is usually that the Robin Hood character is a type of, it's like they're a criminal, they're a felon, or
Mm.
they've done the wrong thing. Now, from a moral standpoint, like there's a bit of a paradox there, like they're trying to do something, that's ultimately that's good in a way, but they're breaking the
Mm.
law or some type of social norm in order to achieve that. So the question then has to come down to which type of good is able to transcend the kind of the zeitgeist or the common sense of the time. And if, like, the laws of the time are your compass for your moral code, then like
Mm.
we would know from many of the laws that exist today and have existed, in the past, law isn't a guide for morality. And like
That is
there are
true.
certain things that are, legal that are immoral and things that
Yes.
are illegal that are completely immoral.
Mm.
So like, like a good example I would find is like people that argue over reproductive rights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's illegal in certain places. Like I think it's illegal in the state of New South Wales to have an abortion, I think. Or, but like,
Um.
let's just run with that hypothetically.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. But like, that doesn't set the morality on that one because it's not something that's actually regulated. Like, people are still able to go out and get an abortion. And like it's like there's a rule, like a law actually in every pub in New South Wales that you have to have a place for people to tie up their horse, and they have to give that horse water and like food and like lodgings or
Mm.
something while you're in the pub. Now,
Yeah.
there'd be no pub left in like Sydney, I would say, that actually has the facility to allow someone to tie their horse up and have them looked after while they go in for a drink. But it's a law. And so,
Yes.
like, they're breaching the law by not providing those facilities. Now, all I'm saying is that law is not akin to or translatable into what is morally the right thing to do in a certain circumstance. Moral
Yes.
compasses, morality comes from a shared kind of belief and an intersubjectivity between like a group of people or two individuals. There's kind of this shared understanding of what is right to do in a circumstance.
Mm.
Like, it's completely subjective, don't get me wrong. You can't objectify this type of understanding. It's intrinsic. And it comes from an experience. But in the Robin Hood case, okay, he might be breaking the law to some degree. This guy, Henry Sugar, may have been breaking the law when he was cheating and in these casinos and stuff like that. But like ultimately, he is giving back
Mm.
to the community in some sense, and he's bettering the lives of people that would not have had access to their basic needs and wants without that contribution. And so in that sense, I think it's fully justifiable to break the law in order to provide some type of good or benefit to a group of people, especially if it is constituted by taking from people that have more than enough and giving it to people that kind of are wanting. That's basically the idea behind a progressive tax system.
Yes.
And like people see taxation as robbery, it's theft. Like it's a very anarchist ideal, and a socialist kind of ideal to believe that taxation is theft. Because like, should you be taking money off anyone? And then like the question has to be asked then, is taxation a weird form of kind of institutionalized altruism? Because everyone has to pay tax. But like most people would make the argument that, the tax doesn't even get spent in the way that I want it, and it's just given to all these people. But like it's still taken from people anyway and redistributed so that society can run and operate and do all the things that kind of we need to survive and live in a certain level of security and quality of life standard and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But like, it's kind of altruistic in a way. You're earning some money for yourself, but you're kind of giving it away so the rest of society can kind of function. So like that's a bit of a tangent to what I was saying before, but like I do believe there is a rationality or a sense of reason behind breaking a law that fails to provide for something or that protects people that don't need to be protected. And like I find this debate, I've had this discussion with people. That's why I wanted to ask you, and I boxed you into a little corner here for us. But like this debate always splits people. There's hard to be a middle ground on this, but like it really divides people. And I'd be interested to see what people think in the comments. If like the Robin Hood situation is favourable or not.
Well, look, let me kind of revise it a bit, because obviously, Davos man actually exists. Like, the Prince Johns of the world do exist. Like, I think that's the reason why Prince John resonated in the Robin Hood legend for so long, because we're told that these individuals create value and they do all these great things when really they're just exploiting people. Yeah. So I guess what I might revise that is, if there was an established Robin Hood-esque figure that I guess had shown to great lengths. Like I'm imagining. Let me take from Yanis Varoufakis's book, Another Now, where in his book he envisages pretty much an identical Earth to the one that we know, but instead in the 2008 financial crisis, there were all these different groups, whether it was like socialist groups, anarchist groups, blah, 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 including these hackers that were able to go into, your Goldman Sachs and all of the big banks and basically do a WannaCry, where they effectively went to all of the people that had mortgages and stuff like that. They made them do strikes, so the banks broke down, and then the governments were like, oh shit, we don't know what to do. Okay, people, like, what do you want? And they're like, well, we want to seize the means of production. And they were successful in creating, well, not necessarily a socialist utopia, but
no, I think it's quite a capitalist kind of world. It's just a very reformed version of capitalism.
Yeah,
highly regulated, as you were saying before.
Yes, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that kind of anarchist / socialist group, if they were to rise from the ashes and they had a track record, that it was quite clear that they were for the people, like in a Robin Hood way, then yeah, by all means, I would get behind it. It's just maybe my realism, my sense of being a realist is getting in the way, that I would want to see a track record before getting behind it.
Yeah.
If
I guess you would want to see that. Like, it makes sense. You want to know if the person is genuine and authentic, before making sure that, like, you can get behind them breaking the law or doing something
yeah,
that is perceivably wrong, like two wrongs don't make a right kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
you want to
yeah,
make sure that everything matches up before you get behind them, which is, I guess, what you were kind of saying before as well, because, like, people might start off with good intentions, but as they say, the way to hell, or the path to hell, is paved with good intentions and all that
intentions.
sort of stuff. So people are
Mm,
easily corruptible. So, like, if you once you let the cat out of the bag and you start supporting this type of stuff, like, where does it end up?
mm,
And who gets to sit there and play judge in what's acceptable behavior, and what's not. And that's why I think the Robin Hood types of the world, like these Henry Sugars and all that sort of stuff, they are quite feared, because, like, they unleash a level of anarchy into society that,
mm,
like, I think that modern man, or modern humans, are very scared of, and they're very skeptical of, because it
mm.
kind of degrades the social order, um,
Yes.
in in a sense, like, creating some type of vigilante kind of behavior, and, like, people taking the law into their own hands and doing what they see fit. And, like, it is obviously antagonistic to, like, the social foundations that we have today. And so people are uncomfortable with it naturally. And, like, when I've had these conversations in the past, and I've witnessed, like, a large group of people being asked this question, like, there was probably about, like, 20 people in the room, and they had to go and stand on one side or the other, depending on whether they thought it was right to steal from the rich and give to the poor, or stand on this side of the room if they thought it was bad, like all that sort of stuff. And surprisingly, it was an even split,
Mm,
in this little social experiment. People, half the people were comfortable with it, and the other half of the people were not. I think the people that were not comfortable with it were more technically oriented people. They kind of looked at things looked at life and the world. Their worldview was very analytical. And so it's like,
mm,
even if something is morally right, but it's technically wrong, it's still wrong, kind of thing. And the other people, I guess, that sat on the side of the room, or moved to the side of the room where they thought that it was justifiable, like, kind of had more of um, an emotional kind of response to certain situations,
mm,
and they dismissed kind of these conceptual and abstract forms of what a law and a box is and all that sort of stuff, and were able to break free from those conceptual boundaries and say, no, you need to look at it in its context. And, like, if there's no wrong outside of the fact that someone's just losing a bit of money, like, who cares? Like, money is not of essence here, and it's not important, to us as a species and to humanity
mm.
at large. So, like, who cares where it goes, as long as it does benefit to people that need it most. So, like, I thought that was an interesting social experiment, because it wasn't as, like, black and white as, like, a majority of people are like, no, you got to stick to the law, or a majority of people are like, hey, no, let's go for Robin Hood, we're all for this type of behavior. It was pretty evenly split in this room. And this is a very isolated experiment. It might happen very differently for other groups of people, but it was very interesting to see that people were basically split in half by this idea.
Well, actually, but you did raise a really good point there, is that stealing money from the rich in this example, or at least in that society, that the proverbial society that you're referring to, is that, well, I'm assuming that this is a market society.
It
So,
is. Yep.
really, when it comes down to it, that money only has value within that system.
Mm,
And but you, by stealing that money, is yeah, it's causing disruption to the system, but
mm,
ultimately, well, you are redistributing
mm.
that money that really probably was exploited from the
Mm.
poor person to begin with, because
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
whole point.
yeah.
That's the whole point of
Yeah.
Prince John, right? Is
Yeah,
that he
yeah, yeah.
takes more taxes than he's supposed to. He's
Mm,
only supposed to be taking
mm.
well, whatever the good amount is, but the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sheriff is obviously taking more than he should
Yeah,
and
yeah.
squeezing them as much as possible. And
Mm,
um, I guess maybe you can say Robin Hood, by disrupting that injustice, He's redistributing what
Mm,
should be given back to the people.
mm. So this is a very specific form of altruism, I guess, that we're discussing at the moment. There's some other forms of altruism that I'd like to kind of touch on, which I think are in themselves susceptible to a form of exploitation. And I think this is a larger kind of critique that kind of Marxists and socialists have of the capitalist system. That like anything that is not captured, kind of like the whole capitalist system kind of works
Mm.
around wage labor, right? And like surplus labor, and kind of like capitalists kind of being able to, you know, stretch out working days or refine the working day in a way that they don't have to pay as much wages, and like the less money and wages they spend, and the more they can reinvest in the accumulation process, and then kind
I
of,
think I think I know where you're going
yeah,
with this.
okay. And so like when it comes to people relying on people to do work, there are certain industries and there are certain types of professions out there that actually do a lot more work than they get paid for. So like a prime example is, like, I would say any teacher out there, anyone in the medical industry,
Mm.
um, so anyone in like those type of service sectors where, like, you know, even people that work in financial services, or even people that work in a lot of private industry kind of stuff, like they work for a consultancy or they work for, yeah, like a private company and stuff like that. Like their core hours might be, you know, 8 hours a day from,
Mm.
like, you know, 8 till 5, or whatever, with your 1 hour lunch break. But like, look at a teacher, like, you know, on the weekend or during their
Mm.
holidays, what are they doing? They're marking like assignments and, like, you know, preparing for the next class and stuff like that. Like their altruistic tendencies, which,
Mm.
like, you know, it's really nice to talk about your Robin Hoods of the world and all of these like people that do fantastic things, but like I think a lot of the altruism in a capitalist society comes from people that go above and beyond what they're paid to do, which is the, you know, the core
Mm.
of the system here. And like it's almost well, it is expected of them. Maybe it's not explicit, but it's implicit, and it is an expectation. And
Yeah.
like without their contribution, without the teacher that, you know, spends, you know, so many hours a night after the, like, a whole day of teaching, marking assignments and, like, you know, setting up classes for the
Mm.
next term or, you know, the next year or whatever, without that, the system crumbles. And so, like, inbuilt in capitalism is this kind of, like you were saying, there's this exploitation of the wage labor and extraction of their value and all that sort of stuff. But like, it's
Mm.
not just taken at the point of the wage labor exchange, which is like, all right, you've done your day's work, go home, kind of thing. I'll exploit you again tomorrow. Like the whole system is predicated on this, and, like, you know, many people in the medical profession, or the medical industry, health services, all that sort of stuff, they're expected to do a lot more than kind of, I guess, what they're paid to do for a
Mm.
day's work and stuff like that, especially like nurses, and people providing like direct services to people. Like they're expected to kind of do a little bit more, deliver a little bit more than, you know, what they're paid for in the middle part of the day. They might go
Yeah.
home and work on stuff and like stay extra hours and like, and all this sort of stuff. And it's like kind of this unwritten kind of sacrifice that people have to make if they want to be able to do their jobs properly and like provide people with the amount of servicing and care that they need.
Yes, but isn't it also curious that what you're referring to, nurses, teachers, and all of that, we are talking as well about what they consider feminized economies, like
Mm,
those
mm,
ones that you expect the caring, and like obviously not all of those economies or those industries are exclusively female,
yeah,
but they
yeah,
are the
yeah,
ones that are majority
yeah,
female, the
yeah,
ones that
yeah,
are less paid, of course,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
also the ones that are tied to what they refer to as social production.
Mm,
So
mm. Well,
that
social production in a way is more outside of the workplace, though. Like, I don't get me
true.
wrong, health services and teaching are factors in social production. Without that, you don't get the little humans that you need to make the capitalist world run.
Yeah.
But like, they're still working within the framework of a wage labor system
Yeah,
there,
true.
because they're
Yeah.
being employed for something. The question is whether they're getting paid for it, and if they're not getting paid for it, they're doing it altruistically, I would say. But like the point I'm really trying to make here is that the capitalist system, as much as people thinks it's like justifiable and it's like, like people are being paid a wage, so it's really okay, like, to exploit them or whatever, because they've signed up to it and they've agreed to it. But like there's a large section of like the productive labor that people contribute that is not paid for. It's not captured by the system, and without it, like the system would kind of crumble. So it's definitely
Mm.
necessary. It's socially necessary, but like its foundation of this stuff that just seeps off into the ether and it's not accounted for, its foundation is altruistic. And so like I would say that capitalism, in a sense, then this market economy that we live in, is not only exploitative on wage labor,
Mm.
and like kind of that dynamic between what happens, the time that people are actually paid for the goods or the services they're producing, but it also extends out into people's own time and relies on people selflessly giving up things and doing things outside of that system to make it operate. So like it's
Yeah.
exploitative in that sense as well. Like it robs from people outside of the wage system.
Yes, but however, you didn't actually go in the direction that I thought you were going to go
Okay.
in. What I thought you were going to bring up was non for profits as well as non government agencies,
Mm,
or
mm,
organizations. And what I thought you were going to bring up was how those organizations very much heavily rely on volunteers. I
yes,
thought you were
and
I
that's
thought
okay.
you were going to bring that up because the
Yeah.
thing is, whenever you visit any of these NFPs or NGOs websites, what is the part of the website that is always prominent and really important?
Mm,
Volunteers. And the
yeah.
thing is, to get their production going, sure, I'm sure they must offer. They're not just offering their gratitude or at least an opportunity for people to feel good about themselves. Like I'm sure there must be some sort of perks that go along with this,
Mm,
but it's built within the structure of those organizations that you have a volunteering base.
yeah.
Like whether this is something akin to like Meals on Wheels or basically all up to probably an industry that I'm quite closely related to, which is going out. Like you have doctors that go out and do various services, like your Fred Hollows and that sort of
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Like they're actually doing quite good in whether that's overseas or whether that's here in I don't know in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure those places require that sort of altruism. But the thing is, you need people giving up their time in order to uh, do that.
Yeah, to
Like,
make the system work. Like without
yes,
these people self-sacrificing and
yeah,
giving away without any like recognition or benefit, really.
yes,
Like they just are expected to, and it's like an unwritten kind of rule to kind of deliver these services. And like there's nothing wrong with that, right?
yes,
If the society was structured in a way where wage labor wasn't a thing and people weren't paid for their service and it was built on more of that communistic lifestyle, which is, each according to their needs and all that sort of stuff, for each according, no, sorry, from each
yeah,
according to their
according
abilities, for
to
each according to their needs. If it was built on that and there was none of this wage labor in existence, then you would have people that would just walk around just doing altruistic things all the time because they could capably do that. They were
mm,
physically able to do so. And so, like, there's nothing wrong with it. But the fact that the system is predicated on paying people for their services and for the things that they're producing, then to rob them of that or not acknowledge that and not have to factor that into the system is a form of exploitation. And the system doesn't just work off wage exploitation, it works off altruistic exploitation as well, and it
yes,
needs
and
to be fully recognized, kind of thing, and kind of called out for what it is. Altruism is obviously a big part of the system, but like I think the real question then has to be like, that cart before the horse. Is it the altruism of people and their and the expectation of society that people are altruistic in this sense? Is that the thing that has kind of become institutionalized and now is exploited? Did that come first, people being altruistic outside of their work, and now it's an expectation of the role? Or was like the system always deficient and people just had to fill the gaps with altruism?
Well, no, you do raise a good point there, and I I think this was a another Mariana Mazzucato point in her book, The Value of Everything, is that actually the reason why non-for-profits and NGOs actually came about was the fact that things were privatized within governments, and naturally NFPs and NGOs came out of that process because something needed to fill the void. And I can already tell you, based on roles that I've had, um, speaking generally without naming names and all of that, I have worked in a finance department where we've, as an NFP, we have had government contracts where we've effectively had to be the middleman, as in the government did not have the resources in order to do some sort of altruistic function. So let's say in this example that it was um, basically government contracts, or at least money to help the new doctors get the necessary training that they needed. Uh, I was part of that NFP that was the middle person that gave it to the necessary communities, and we had a certain cost recovery that we did from administering this program on behalf of the government. So like the fact that the government isn't big enough in order to run these sort of programs, you have to have the altruistic organizations step in and administer it on behalf of the government. Whereas if the government was big enough, maybe these places wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And it's something worth considering.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I guess it's not really, I guess it's arbitrary really if it's a chicken or the egg thing. The fact of the matter is that it is actually inbuilt into the system now, and the system relies on a level of altruism from a large section of society, not just like these standout, like kind of Robin Hood characters, these mythological kind of people. Like, it's actually a large factor, and like without it, society would crumble. So like the idea then that society built more on an altruistic tendency, and like people providing services and dealing with one another in terms of their social relations without the medium of money as like the thing that, like, the lubricant that makes society work. It's not that far-fetched. If you look at the society from the idea that altruism exists, and like there's a large portion of the way that everyone relates to each other that works off this kind of free and giving of services and abilities and skills and all that sort of stuff, it's not such a far-fetched ideal then to make the transition all the way and to say, do we really need then money to make all of this sort of stuff work? And can we rely on more of an altruistic society? Maybe this is the development towards socialism. And I'm just going to leave it there.
Well, you know what? Why don't we end on that point then? Okay, and of course, as always, what's that synthwave art? Very interesting prompt for this one.
It's a great piece of artwork. I really don't know what's going on, but I'm captured by it.
Okay, do you want to know the prompts? Because this is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Altruism, helping the poor, and taking government.
Interesting.
Sorry, let me say that again. Altruism, helping the poor, and taking government.
Right.
And
there's a lot going on in that picture.
Yeah, I'm interested by the big dollar bills that he's got in his hands.
I'm more interested in those like arcade style computers or whatever they are that are lining kind of the perspective in this scene here. I want to know what they're about.
Also, is the guy sitting down supposed to be an army soldier? And
I don't know, they kind of look like soldiers, but they also look like, I don't know, old school train attendants or something like that. Like, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, very interesting picture. A lot to digest there from the AI world. I wonder what they were going for.
Okay, and with that, remember everyone to keep thinking and keep learning. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Mr. A.
Thank you very much, 4AS, and to all of you out there, don't forget, Revolutionary Think Tank Podcast is moving to a new channel. We'll put a link in the description. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. And also remember, I am, you are, we are a MysterE.